Some cities appear in an artist's life only once. Others quietly follow you for decades. For me, that city has always been Prague. Yes, it is the capital of my country and some of my family lives there. But over the years, I have also developed my own long and personal relationship with this remarkable place. I first visited Prague when I was 12 on a school trip. At the time, I had no idea that this city would later become the setting for more important moments in my life, including the chance to appear as an extra in an international film. Even during the years when Prague was still behind the Iron Curtain, many international films were made there. But my connection with Prague would grow in many other ways as well. When I first came to Prague as a young teenager, I was drawing a lot, like many children do, but I didn't draw cities. On my second visit with my mother and sister, I was about 15. By then, I had started to notice architecture and I began taking photographs. We spent a week walking through the main parts of the city and I started to understand its beauty. Prague felt different, almost like a door to the outside world beyond the borders of my small country. I still didn't paint cities at that time, but I did begin to draw and paint much more. At the time, I was living behind the Iron Curtain, and Prague felt closer to the outside world than anywhere else I knew. I was drawn to that feeling. I wanted to see more of the world. Then something unexpected happened. When Barbra Streisand came to Prague to look for locations for her movie Yentl, I made my first drawing of her walking through the city. Later, when the filming began, I had a chance to work as an extra in the movie. I also lived alone in Prague for 6 weeks at my aunt's apartment. I was not yet 18. For a young future artist living at that time and in that place, it was an extraordinary and very inspiring moment. Even before the filming began, in anticipation of it, I created my first oil painting inspired by Prague, and eventually I was able to give it to Barbra. It was one of those experiences that quietly shapes your sense of what might be possible. Like Yentl in the film, I began to feel that perhaps nothing is impossible. There's a place in Prague called Nový Svět, or New World. It sits just below the castle, a hidden area of small houses where artists often like to live. In some ways, it reminded me of the famous Golden Lane, where the alchemists of Rudolf II once lived, but without the tourists, quiet and mysterious. In my 20s, I first made a sketch of it from a photograph. Later, I created a colored pencil version that I no longer have. I gave it to someone. Years later, while living in California, the memory of that place inspired me to paint a Prague fantasy scene in watercolor. And later still, after I returned to Brno, I recreated it digitally, because I wanted to experience that scene again. That digital version eventually became my most sold artwork. The eyes in the sky came from a dream. Looking back now, I realized that Prague was slowly becoming part of my artistic language. But there's something interesting. For many years, I avoided painting the most famous views of Prague. Places like Charles Bridge and Prague Castle have been painted thousands of times, and I was always drawn more to quieter corners, places people walk past without realizing they could become a painting. I think I was also searching for my own way of seeing before approaching something so iconic. Even the fantasy painting that I gave to Barbara was inspired by a place that is not widely painted. I remember making a special trip to sketch it. Looking back now, I see something I didn't recognize at the time. This painting already carried a direction I would return to many years later. After giving the oil painting to Barbara, I recreated it again from my sketches in colored pencil. And in 2024, I painted it again digitally. I share the full story of that painting here on my channel. Over the years, my visits to Prague continued, but for different reasons. Sometimes to see family, sometimes for theater, sometimes for work. After moving abroad, returning to Prague always felt inevitable. And now that I live in Brno again, going to Prague feels like a small treat. Interestingly, the two exhibitions I've had in my country so far were also in Prague, together with my brother, who is a photographer. So in many ways, my relationship with the city has continued to evolve. Recently, I finally decided to paint Charles Bridge. In some ways, it is the most realistic Prague painting I have made, but the colors come from a very different influence. I started with a single color from a palette inspired by Henri Matisse, and then built a new palette digitally using color harmonies. I also used a newer approach in my process. Instead of sketching first, I built the city from blocks of color and only added details later. So even though the subject is traditional, the color world and the method became something more personal. And this painting may not be the end of the story. I'm planning to reinterpret it in my mosaic style, this time using a full palette inspired by Henri Matisse. So after all these years, it seems that Prague is still opening new paths in my work. Some places appear in an artist's life only briefly, but some stay with you for decades. For me, Prague has always been one of them. And I have a feeling it will continue appearing in my paintings for many years to come.